Why do some fighters look unstoppable early in their careers, only to fail later, while others take years to reach the top and stay there? In the UFC, success is not just about how good a fighter is, but when they are at their best. Some rise quickly through speed and aggression, dominating before opponents can adjust. Others build slowly, refining their skills over time until they become more complete and consistent. At first, it can seem random, but when you look deeper, there are clear reasons why fighters peak early and why others don't. So, let's get to the juicy part. My name is the MMA Explainer, and this is why some fighters peak early and others don't. In the UFC, talent alone doesn't decide when a fighter reaches their best. Some fighters like Sage Northcutt rise quickly, tearing through opponents and dominating early and then fade like nothing happened. Others take years to develop, like Glover Teixeira, slowly building toward their peak over time. At first glance, it can seem unpredictable, but when you look closer, there are clear patterns behind why fighters peak when they do. Well, first of all, we have the early physical advantages. Some fighters peak early because their style relies heavily on physical traits that are strongest at a young age. Speed, explosiveness, and reaction time often give younger fighters an immediate edge. A fighter like Ilya Topuria benefits from sharp timing and fast hands, allowing him to compete at the highest level early in his career. These advantages can create rapid success, especially against opponents who cannot match that pace. But over time, as competition improves and physical attributes decline, those same advantages become harder to rely on. The second factor is style dependency. The way a fighter fights plays a major role in when they peak. Fighters with aggressive, high risk styles often find success early because they overwhelm opponents before weaknesses are exposed. Khamzat Chimaev is an example of this, using pressure and wrestling to dominate quickly. But styles like this can be difficult to sustain long term. As opponents adapt and fights become longer, the same approach can become less effective. In contrast, more measured and adaptable styles tend to develop over time, leading to later peaks. There's also the experience curve. Some fighters simply need more time to understand the sport at a deeper level. Fighters like Alexander Volkanovski did not rely on early dominance, but instead built their skills gradually. Charles Oliveira, former champion and current BMF title holder, is another great example. Over time, they developed fight IQ, adaptability, and strategic awareness. These qualities often take years to fully form. As a result, their peak comes later, but it is often more stable and consistent because it is built on understanding rather than raw ability. The fourth one that I'm going to talk a bit more is adaptability. As mentioned before, one of the biggest differences between early peaks and late peaks is the ability to adapt. Fighters who rely on one dominant strength may rise quickly, but struggle when that strength is neutralized. Fighters who continuously evolve tend to extend their peak over a longer period. Islam Makhachev is an example of this, improving his striking while maintaining his grappling base. This allows him to remain effective even as opponents adjust to his style, making him dangerous on both realms of a fight. And by looking at him, there's nobody stopping him in the near future. There's also the level of competition. Fighters who face high level opponents early in their careers often develop faster, but may also take losses that affect their trajectory. Others build their record against lower competition, creating the appearance of early dominance. This practice is called stat padding, and when they finally face elite opponents, the difference becomes clear. This can create the illusion that a fighter peaked early, when in reality, they were simply not tested at the highest level yet. Damage and wear is our next indicator. Fighting at a high level takes a physical toll, and that toll affects when a fighter peaks. Fighters like Tony Ferguson and BJ Penn, who are involved in wars early in their careers, may decline sooner because of accumulated damage. Others who manage their fights more carefully can extend their careers and reach their peak later. This is why some fighters appear to fall off quickly, while others remain competitive for years. There's also division dynamics. The division a fighter competes in also affects when they peak. Some divisions are deeper and more competitive, requiring more development before a fighter can reach the top. Others may allow quicker success due to fewer elite contenders. This means a fighter's peak is not just about their ability, but also about the environment they are competing in. Coaching and environment. This one is really important. A coach can make or break you. A fighter's team and training environment play a major role in their development. Fighters who are placed in strong systems with experienced coaches like GSP often improve steadily over time. Those without that structure, like Diego Sanchez, may rely more on natural ability early on, but struggle to evolve. This difference can determine whether a fighter peaks early and falls off, or continues improving throughout their career. Similar to competition levels, there's also the illusion of early peaks. They can be easily linked because sometimes what looks like an early peak is actually just early exposure. A fighter may look dominant at first, but that dominance has not yet been tested against the highest level of competition. Once they face more complete opponents, the gap becomes visible. This creates the impression that they declined, when in reality they simply reached a level where their current skills were no longer enough. There's also the late bloomers. On the other side, some fighters improve steadily and reach their best form later in their careers. These fighters, like Jan Blachowicz, often rely less on physical attributes and more on understanding, efficiency, and adaptability. Their peak may come later, but it is often more sustainable because it is built on a broader skill set. Timing and opportunity are also crucial. A fighter's peak only matters if it aligns with the right moment. Ilya Topuria reached his peak against Alexander Volkanovski at a time when Volkanovski had already gone through multiple high-level wars and a long title run. Topuria's skill was real, but the timing amplified its impact. On the other hand, fighters like Tony Ferguson built momentum and reached their peak during one of the most competitive eras in lightweight history, but never captured the title due to timing, injuries, and matchmaking shifts. This shows that two fighters can reach their best form, yet have completely different outcomes depending on when that peak happens. Lastly, but not less important, we have longevity versus impact. The timing of a peak also affects how fighters are remembered. Yeah, Conor McGregor peaked early with explosive performances and captured titles quickly, creating a lasting impact despite a shorter period of dominance. In contrast, fighters like Kamaru Usman built their peak over time and maintained it through less exciting yet highly consistent performances against elite competition. One path creates immediate recognition, while the other builds long-term legacy. Both are forms of success, but they shape how dominance is perceived and remembered differently within the sport. To summarize all this, we have to understand why this matters. Understanding why fighters peak at different times changes how their careers are viewed. It explains why early success does not always lead to long-term dominance, and why slower development can sometimes produce more complete fighters. It also highlights that success in the UFC is not just about how good a fighter is, but when they are at their best. At the highest level, timing matters as much as talent. Some fighters arrive at their peak when the division is favorable, while others reach it when the competition is at its strongest. This combination of factors shapes not just individual careers, but the entire landscape of the sport. This was the video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel and like the video. It will be highly appreciated. Peace.